Hello and welcome, anybody, everybody, but probably nobody. This is ThorW here to bring you another episode in the PvP Basics tutorial for Dungeon Fighter Online, where you're going to learn how to become a PvP monster. Today, I'd like to talk to you all about the Z-axis and the application of pressure. So, to start us off, let's start with the Z-axis. We've been talking about the X-axis and the Y-axis for quite some time, and what they are, how they're important, and what's the Z-axis? What is this new letter I'm introducing into your vocabulary? So, the Z-axis is basically the sky that is above the standing player. Any area that is, for the most part, off the ground is considered the Z-axis. Now, when you talk about the Z-axis, how do you access it? Well, simply jump. Jumping puts you into the Z-axis. So, very simple, very minor. What's it good for, though? Why do we care about the Z-axis? What's the point of it? Well, there are several different ways to make use of the Z-axis. One way is to use it as an approach. You can approach your opponent, and then there are certain classes with certain skills that make use of approaches from the Z-axis, like, say, Slayer. Slayer's Ash Fork ability allows them to approach from the Z-axis and create a shockwave when they hit the ground. But Thor, why would I do that? I mean, look how low you are. Look at that. You're fully within your opponent's reach and everything like that. You can't do much from that height. Well, my friends, before you go anymore, there is a skill available to us called Leap. Leap is one of the basic skills available to every single class. It is 20 SP per level with a maximum of 10, so 200 SP is going to max that skill out. What does Leap do, though? Leap, by its description, if we take a good look at it, temporarily increases jump height. But hold on, let's get some more. Jump height plus 20%, so they say. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll apply Leap to ourselves. And look at that jump. We are jumping off the damn screen, basically. Bye! We're gone. Our planet needs us, so we're gonna fly. So as you can see, Leap drastically, not dramatically, drastically increases your jump. Let's take a look at the comparison of a regular jump. Just a couple regular jumps, not too high, very short. Now let's activate Leap. Oh my goodness, that is an incredible increase. I think that's actually a misprint. It says 20% jump height increase. It's more like 200%. Look at that. You are jumping like the height of 3 or 4 characters like that. So, how are we able to make use of the Z-axis with skills like Leap? Well, as I said before, certain classes make better use of it than others. For example, Slayers have aerial attack, which allows them to just slash while they're in the air. They have Ash Fork, which gives them a dive bomb, basically, a dive kick, which creates a shockwave when they hit. So even if they miss the initial use of it, the shockwave will knock their opponent down and open them up to another thing. Now, as I said before, certain classes are going to make better use of this offensively than others. But you can always use this as a defensive measure. Leap is a relatively decent skill for something like that. Now, let's say that your opponent's attacking you and they're using something like this Ice Wave Sword and you see it coming to you. Well, if you have Leap available to you, you can jump right over it. You get a lot of distance covered by your jump when you have Leap available to you. And you're able to gain that extra jump height. And for a comparison, let's go ahead and see how far... decent length, normally. But when we go ahead and we'll activate Leap one more time, it'll be off cooldown right now. And look at that, it gives us probably a good 20% or so more distance. Certainly lets us go farther. So Leap has a few multifaceted abilities to help us make use of the Z-axis. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to suggest that most classes don't invest too heavily in Leap because most classes don't quite have all of these abilities that make advantage of being in the air. Like Slayer has several, Gunner has a couple of different tricks they can use while in the air, but most classes don't quite have that much. So at your discretion, and you might want to find a couple guides on your class out there, here and there, for if you should take leap beyond the first level or something like that. Usually it's just as utility, but some classes, more than others, definitely make good use of it. So as I was saying before, certain classes take advantage of leap better than others. Let's take a look at one of the tricks that Gunner can use to cross a gap on the Z-axis. Generally, you're going to see launchers doing this a bit more than others because launchers use this weapon type, but currently I have a hand cannon equipped. Now, when you have a hand cannon equipped, you'll notice that you have a great deal of mobility in the air. So let's activate leap. Oh, whoops, fired the wrong way. And look at that, we can cross most of the area. Now, if we go ahead and reset and we activate leap with aerial shots and shoot the right way, then we can cross the entire arena right away with the use of a hand cannon. Generally, you're going to see launchers making better use of this than anyone else. But this is something that you have to take into account when you're against certain opponents or when you're playing certain classes. Alright, so now that we've finished talking about the Z-axis, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. Let's talk about pressure and the application of it. So, when I talk about pressure, what is pressure? Pressure is the use or the threat of use of skills to limit your opponent's movements and put them under stress. Notice that this is a relatively similar definition to zoning, because zoning is a type of pressure. Learning how to apply pressure, learning what pressure is one of the most important core concepts in being able to effectively PvP in DFO. Pressure limits your opponent's options of what they're allowed to do while keeping as many open for yourself as possible. Applying pressure forces your opponent into a tough position and really forces your opponent to continue making the right decision as you keep applying pressure to try and alleviate it and be able to counter with their own pressure or their own kind of counterattack, anything like that. So while you're pressuring your opponent has to constantly make the correct decision in their movement, their ability use, what attacks they use, the cast times they're allowed to use, when to use super armor, etc., etc., while they're under pressure. And any small mistake that they make while you're effectively applying pressure to them, and while you're properly keeping them under your thumb, makes it so that it slowly but surely gets more and more difficult for them to get out of this pressured situation and be able to counterattack you. Now, when we talk about pressure, pressure comes in several forms. There isn't just one kind of pressure. Like when I said earlier, zoning is a type of pressure. That's one of them. We're going to start with it. Offensive classes have a type of pressure. Zoning is a type of pressure, and even defensive classes have their own special type of pressure. I kind of try and break down pressure into these three main categories that then branch off down lower into some subcategories. So, for example, offensive pressure from classes. They generally pressure their opponent by sticking to a relatively close range to their opponent and capitalizing when their opponent makes a misposition, a misstep, walks into a super armor skill, something like that. They apply pressure by being within range to hit their skills, because they have a great deal of threat on their opponent if they hit that skill, because they can follow up with a lot of front-loaded damage, a strong combo, something like that. Something like, say, a monk is a good offensive class. A male ranger, in my opinion, is a pretty good offensive class because of the pressure that they can provide when they're close to you. When they're a little further away, they have minor amounts of pressure here and there, but they're much scarier when they're close to you, when they have that threat of knocking you into a combo, into a big amount of just front-loaded damage that they can apply to you. Zoning is another type of pressure that I like to, that I always think about. Those classes pressure by using ranged skills, AoE skills, to limit the area that their opponent is allowed to move through. This is coupled with you know, the threat of an offensive move when a sufficient connection is made. So good zoning class examples would be like Male Brawler is a really good example of a zoning class. When he's throwing out those large AoE poisons, those bleeding needles, the rocks, all of that, you have to consistently dodge around his area, the zones that he's creating, and try to get to him, try to get some sort of attack on him while he's pressuring you. And if you make a mistake at any time, you get hit with a stun, you run up at the wrong angle, he's going to capitalize on that and throw you into a combo. Another decent example of a zoning class would be like a Soulbender. They throw down their ghosts, and they have this large AoE where it's very dangerous for their opponents to walk, especially in the cases of, say, like Ice Saya, where if you walk through there, you might be unlucky enough to get frozen to the ground, and then they can very easily follow up on top of you. And then the final kind of pressure that I like to think about when I'm talking about classes, I like to think of defensive classes and the kind of pressure that they can place. Now, the defensive kind of pressure is a little bit harder to just explain how it works, but overall, they usually pressure with a big mix of zoning you away from them and a different type of offense. They generally have a lot of these defensive classes. I'm trying to think of how I want to explain this, but a lot of these big defensive classes generally have devastatingly strong abilities that are on relatively long cooldowns. So what they want to do is they want to skirt around, flit around, and then once their big cooldowns are up, they have this massive threat that they can generate onto their opponents, where their opponents know that when this is off cooldown, they can suddenly unload a big damage onto you. And their opponents now have to try and play around that. So while those cooldowns are down, they're trying to keep you a little bit away from them, stuff like that, zone you away again until they can get those up, and then they can go on the offensive. That's one type of defensive class. Another type of defensive class, let's say, for example, a summoner, a female mage. They want to keep you away from them all the time, but you're going to continuously be poked by their summons or their skills. You can say Elementalist is another defensive class, because they don't want you really all that close to them. They just want to keep throwing out poke at you, and if they happen to hit the right skill, they'll come up and they'll follow up with an offensive combo, and then back off again and continue this defensive play. Alright, so when you guys are out there and you're learning your characters for PvP, you got to try and learn what kind of pressure you're trying to apply to your opponent, and what kind of pressure your opponent's trying to apply to you. I have a basic list, which is what I personally would categorize most classes as, but for offensive rush-down kind of classes, these classes that want to get in your face and pressure you by being near you, by being able to open up a combo on you, and I've got these categorized by their subclass, by their main class first, and then the subclass. So, in the case of Male Gunner, I've got Ranger in there. Now this is a little spills over into the zoning kind of offensive class, because Ranger has several zoning skills that he wants to use, several super armors he wants his opponent to approach him on. So you can go either way with that, but I personally play my Ranger very aggressively, so I kind of put him into that category. Female Gunner, I also put her Ranger into this offensive category. Female Mage, we've got the Battle Mage, very aggressive kind of mage play. The Priest, we've got the Monk and the Avenger, are both very aggressive, very in-your-face kind of classes. For Male Slayer, we've got Weapon Master and Berserker, definitely. Female Fighter, Striker, and Brawler, those two definitely like to get in your face. Brawler, surprisingly, very much in your face in Female Fighter, and it's a very different playstyle for the Male Brawler. I don't know too much about Male Fighter, so I don't really know where to put their classes, and the same with Male Mage. I don't know exactly where to put them. I'm not going to cover Dark Knight or Knight or Creator. Knight and Creator aren't allowed in PvP. Dark Knight, I think, is too overpowered for PvP right now. He seems to fit in every class all the time forever. So eventually they'll try and iron things out with those, and we'll see that. Moving over into the more defensive style stuff for the male gunner, I've got Spitfire and Launcher. Those guys want to be relatively far away from you, keep you away from them. For female gunner, I've got Spitfire. Her launcher kind of fits in there as well, so pretty much the same on the gunner side. For female mage, we've definitely got the Summoner. The Witch kind of fits in here. She's a little offensive, a little defensive. She's more utility based, I guess, if you want to really categorize her. The Priest, their last two classes, Crusader and Exorcist, relatively defensive overall. Very utility based, so they kind of fit in here as well. They're not really offensive zoners or anything like that. They're a little bit further on the defensive side. For the male Slayer, we've got Soulbender and Asura. They're both going to fit into this slightly more defensive side, this more defensive zoning side, where they're going to try and catch their opponent making a mistake. They can certainly go in on their opponents, because male Slayer, as a base, has a lot of good skills for approaching their opponent, so don't expect them to all play this way. Female Fighter, Nenmaster, and Grappler, they're definitely more defensive-based on their side. Like the female Grappler has these big front-loaded burst skills with somewhat longer cooldowns. So she fits into this category well. The male Fighter, again, Nenmaster and Grappler, very similar to the female Fighter, basically the exact same. Moving on to like offensive zoners, like I was talking about before. The gunner classes, pretty much both their mechanics fit into this category, where they want to keep you zoned away, but they're very offensive about it, and they're willing to go in at a moment's notice. The Elementalist female mage, she's relatively offensive. Again, this is one where you can swap between being a defensive zoner or an offensive zoner with this kind of class. They fit very close into the similar categories, where sometimes she's going to play very defensive, but other times she comes up after you. And that's where mind games start to be played. Nothing really from the male Slayer or female Fighter here, but male Fighter Brawler. Brawler is in this offensive zoning PvP kind of class when it comes to DFO. If you've never seen a male Brawler before, they do a lot of zoning, and I should have some footage on screen for you to have seen it at least a little bit. And for the Thief class, Necromancer fits pretty well into this offensive zoning style as well. So if you guys are actually using this as a guide, find where your particular class seems to be, and I will have something up on the screen for you to see so that you have a reference. And then this is the basic kind of playstyle that your class thrives in. Your class doesn't have to play this way. By no means. You can play a super offensive, aggressive female elementalist if you want to, or a super defensive, I don't know, a super defensive necromancer or something like that, and play a lot of keep away with bits of poke here and there. Whatever works for you. But these basic playstyles are what's going to really thrive in the PvP environment. It's what you're going to find a lot of other players doing, because it's generally what the most efficient way to play is for these classes. So on this, I'm going to have a little image up with a table, and there's going to be a little spillover. Like you're going to see Elementalist on offensive zoning PvP and defensive zoning PvP at the same time. But that's because it is very utility based, and because of that, it's a class that has the ability to swap between one and the next. Now, does that make it a much better class than the others in PvP? Not really. It just means you have this choice. Some classes have less of a choice, like a female battle mage has very little range skills, so she's very much pigeonholed into this offensive kind of rushdown style of PvP. Does that mean it's a weak class? By no means, no. It's one of the strongest PvP classes out there. Battle Mage is very good at rushdown and killing their opponent. They do a lot of damage, they have great combos, they have great approach, stuff like that. They just don't have the utility to swap between one and the next. So I hope this gives you guys a basic idea of what pressure is, a little bit of how to apply it, and a little bit of what you should be looking for in your class. Or what your class kind of excels at when it comes to this PvP environment. And hopefully this helps you guys out. So that's going to be the end of this particular lesson for today. Be sure to check the description below for the PvP playlist if you haven't seen the previous episodes and you want to learn a little bit more about the basics. Keep in mind for even further below in the description where I am doing a Let's Play of Ranger from level 1 to level 70 during this OBT2 events where you try and level up from 1 to whatever, and I'm going for the max level. We'll be getting it, no problem, easy peasy. So if you want to learn how to play Male Ranger and how to PvE with it, come watch that, come learn with me. It should be jolly fun. Jolly fun! And check even further below in the description to see some links to playlists I've done in the past. Binding of Isaac's a big one I've done in the past. I'm definitely getting back into it and starting to do a lot more with it. And I hope to see you guys on the next episode of the PvP Basics, where we're going to cover another topic, and we're going to keep building on this foundation to become PvP monsters. I'll see you guys in the arena, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye-bye, everybody!